just was something that I had to do. So my co-founder quit his job about 4 months before that point. And 4 months later, I looked at myself, I was like, I'm just going to quit. And I quit. And then at some point, we ended up where we are here today, where we have a team of 7 people. And we're doing something which is making a programming language, which is very different than a lot of other stuff.
So I'll get into BAML in a second, but you actually did some interesting projects at Microsoft and Google. I mean, the HoloLens, facial recognition software, and a lot of entrepreneurship we've been talking about throughout the day. If you want to share a few key lessons you learned from being innovative inside of enterprise.
Yeah, I think when you're in a company, you really operate very differently than you do when you're outside of a company. Like as a founder, you can do anything. Like no one's going to stop you. As an employee at a company or even a team member on a company, on any team, you do have to make sure everyone is aligned to some degree. So for example, when we were building Face ID, parts of the algorithm were, is this recorded?
Yeah.
No, it's all good.
Here, just put the mic down, I won't pick it up.
It's all good. I'll find out the right way to phrase it. When we were building Face ID, there were some technical decisions that perhaps were like, let's rewrite all this to make it way faster because the current system isn't going to be good enough. And to do that sort of claim, one, it's extremely high risk because the product is at risk and there's a lot of stakeholders involved beyond just your team. On the other hand, the other pipeline that is just making the current system faster may not be good enough and you have to balance those risks. But regardless of what you do, everyone has to be on board with what you do. If you make the wrong call, someone will take the blame for it in the company. And usually in corporate culture, it's very different. Startup, where in startup, it's always your fault. There's no one else like it. It's always your own fault. In a company, you try and build processes in place where it isn't that way. You don't really blame someone, but you try and do the best. But with hardware, it's even harder. Because most of the projects I worked on, I think they require almost no mistakes to be able to ship the hardware. And I remember one of the craziest mistakes that I ever saw. So most computers, how many of you guys are developers? A few of you.
Raise your hand if you're a developer.
How many of you have never written a line of code in your life? Come on. Okay, so everyone's written at least.
Hey, me too.
Alright, someone's written at least a couple lines. Okay, everyone's written a couple lines of code, but most computers are built of units that do math. And we rely on the truth that math is always going to be true. On the HoloLens, we discovered something really weird, which was when you divided a number by -3, it would always return, I think it was, I don't know if it was exact number, it was like -3 point something. That was a floating point number. When you divided it, it would always return -1. And we thought we wrote bugs in our algorithm. We chased it down for weeks. We couldn't find it. Then the simulator we tried for the custom hardware also tried to reproduce the bugs. We couldn't find it. Turns out the hardware was wrong. The wiring on the actual chip was incorrect. And I think when I look at these kinds of issues, like there's no one to really blame there. It's more of a process problem. But in a startup, you don't really have as many processes in place, especially in very early days. You just have to fix everything yourself. And that was probably the biggest difference that I noted when I went from like a company culture to like a startup culture. Some amount of ownership it doesn't even compare.
I'll get into the fun stuff, Ben. It's just your day in and day out. But I want to go back to the beginning of the company and what problem did you see? Why did you start BAML? And maybe some tips and tricks for anybody that may want to end up going into Y Combinator, getting into Y Combinator.
Yeah, I want to talk about YC a little bit first, and talk about how we got in. So my co-founder and I have gone through 12 pivots, like 12 extremely different pivots. We built EdTech for like basically like a Coursera competitor. We tried to build a Slack competitor. We built automated drive-thrus. We attempted to build Cursor, but didn't think it was a good idea. I can talk about that later. I still don't, but that's a different conversation. We attempted to build optimized ML models for a little bit. And those are some of the ideas. Like I said, we went through 12 different ones. It was rough. Like, when people say doing a startup is hard, it's not really hard from like the sense like you work more hours than you ever did. You do. You 100% work more hours than you ever did. But there's this emotional tax that you pay which is like when we were pivoting around, and we've worked on these pivots for months. Like we've been at this for like 4+ years now, maybe 5. Oh my God. Anyway, people don't talk about how rough it is to have poured your heart and soul into something for about 5 or 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, live and breathe it every single day, and then one day wake up not believing in it anymore. It's like a breakup that you go through over and over again until you find something that you don't have to break up with. But usually in relationships, they last a little bit longer before you feel that bad. And startup you go through it constantly. And your customers will sometimes not be direct with you. They'll tell you, oh, it's good, I'll keep using it. And they just won't tell you it sucks. Sometimes they'll even pay you money and they won't tell you it sucks. And you're just stuck in this rabbit hole, solving this problem for this one customer effectively as a consultancy shop instead of building software that can scale. There's no real shortcut there. If you sign up to the startup, you're doing that. That's what you're signing up for. Like waking up in this rat race that you put yourself in. You're going to run every day on your own because no one else is going to move that gear. But getting to Y Combinator, we actually got it. I've interviewed 4 times in my life. I interviewed once in 2013 with a biotech startup. I was a sophomore in college, and I remember YC flew us out there. And then Paul Graham tells us, we don't invest in biotech companies. I'm like, why did you fly me out here? And at that point, the real thing should have been, I should have pivoted. I was an undergrad, I barely knew software. There's no way I was going to build the biotech company I was thinking about doing. Maybe we would have gone in, but I mean, we were so convicted on that idea that we just pursued it for a while. The second time I applied was in 2021 with a friend of mine while I was at Google. It was for like a remote work space kind of, it was for an ed tech company that I wanted to go do. We didn't get the interview. The third time I applied was with my current, I applied again with that tech company one more time with that same co-founder. We didn't get it again. Then I applied with my current co-founder with an idea that was regarding ads for Twitch, but super interactive. I still think it's really cool, but you cannot build a $1 billion business on Twitch, as you learn. I remember in that interview, how do you know what Michael Seibel is? Who Michael Seibel is?
Does anybody know? Pablo?
He's the co-founder of Twitch. He made Twitch, and we were trying to build ads on top of Twitch. So there's not really many better people to ask us questions except for him. And how many of you have ever looked into Y Combinator and know kind of what it is?
Anybody? Raise your hand.
Okay, so for those of you, and how many of you don't know anything about Y Combinator?
The rest of you, right?
Okay, so Y Combinator is basically an accelerator where they funded companies like Stripe, Airbnb, Routable, and a bunch of other, Dropbox, Reddit, all these companies are funded by them. And they invest very, very early on. They have probably one of the lowest acceptance rates of most accelerators out there, and probably the highest $1 billion rate out of most startups, most funds out there. So when we applied to them with this idea, Michael Seibel, and Twitch was a Y Combinator company, he interviews us, and typically an interview process is 10 minutes, usually. We got into the interview. At 6 minutes in, Michael Seibel asked us a question, do you guys even watch Twitch? And we did not. We're 30-year-olds. Like, we don't watch Twitch, right? I'm like, but we can say that. We were so in our own heads. I'm like, yes, we watched. Obviously, we're going to build this space. We're going to make this work. And we said some answers that he could tell. I think once they've interviewed thousands of people over this time period, they can just tell.
By the way, this goes back to being authentic. Always be authentic.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard, because I was authentically like, I want to build this company. But I hate ads. Why was I doing this? I remember I worked on the ads team back at Meta when it was like 2015. We were one of the first machine learning ads team out there as an intern. And I literally didn't take my return offer back then, purely because I hate ads. That's the only reason I didn't go back. I was like, I don't want to work on ads. Even though it was really cool, Facebook was growing. I think it was only like 5,000 people or something back then. I just don't like ads. And I couldn't justify it. Now I'm trying to build this ad company. I was like, oh, maybe it'll succeed and I'll go do the actual company I want to do. It's just not do things I don't like. I remember after that interview, we woke up, my co-founder and I independently ended up staying all night, thinking about all the different ways we should change our company without each talking to us. Next morning, we wake up at 7 a.m. and we're like, are you up? He's like, yes. I'm like, yes. And we just talked like all day about all the different ideas we could go do. And at that point, my co-founder actually had enough. He quit Amazon, his job, and he was like, I'm done. I'm just going to do this full time. I don't want to work part-time while on my startup, while doing this as well. I just want to work full-time on startup for 1 year. We gave us 2-week notice, we came up with a new idea, and we started working. On the day of his actual 2-week notice, we lost conviction in our other idea we had come up with. We literally were like, we're not doing this anymore, we need a better idea. And the thing I think that gave him the most conviction back then was while he was sad that we lost conviction, he was not sad that he was quitting his job. He was more excited. It was scary, but the step that he wanted to go take. So he played around with a couple different things. 4 months later, I quit my job as well. And the company that we ended up applying to Y Combinator with 4 months later after that was called Glue, which was a Slack competitor. And I think what was different this one time is we only spent 1 hour on the application. Every other time we crafted every word to be perfect. But this time we were so busy with what we were doing and like actually building and trying to serve customers, I should say, that we didn't waste time. We just were like, oh, screw it, let me write this application down, spend an hour, spend 20 minutes making the 1 minute, there's like a 1 minute video on it. We took 4 takes, so we spent about 6 minutes recording that video, and we said, screw it, let's just ship it. For the previous application, for the Twitch ads one, I remember making a promo video that took me 7 hours of editing time to apply to Y Combinator. There's a clear difference in how we were operating, and I think they could tell. And they told us during the interview, please change your idea. This is a horrible idea. We funded many of these Slack competitors, none of them work. Don't do them. We said we respectfully disagree, and continued to work as a Slack competitor for a while. But that was kind of our story of how we got into Y Combinator. We pivoted 4 months later in the middle of Y Combinator into not our current idea, but into a couple other ideas. And in about November of 2023, or November, September of 2023, we finally got a group down and we started building what we're building today, which is Bamble.
I lost count on how many pivots you said.
12. I don't lose count.
Can you tell what BAML stands for?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Bamble stands for basically a made-up language, or badass machine learning if your boss isn't around. But it's basically a programming language that makes every model perform better without Python.
I want to get into what you learned from Y Combinator besides it's okay to pivot.
Well, Y Combinator doesn't say it's okay to pivot. Y Combinator, I think, says something slightly different, which is find the thing you care about and find the thing that other people care about and what they need and go do that. And just pursue it relentlessly. I remember the first talk I went to Y Combinator that really reminded me why being a startup is a bad idea, which was, how many of you want to do startups? Raise your hand, just so I can get an idea. A few.
And this is a lot more than the beginning of the day, so
Okay.
I'm excited.
We're more excited now.
How many of you want to do a startup to make more money? Cool, one of you. How many of you want to do a
Be
startup?
honest.
Yeah, be honest.
Be honest, please.
There's
be
nothing
honest.
wrong. I know tons of people out doing a startup just to make more money. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no purity to the intent. I think you just do what you want to do and that's okay. How many of you want to do a startup to have more influence on the world? How many of you want to do a startup to perhaps run a really, really big team? There's a few reasons out here where you could want to do a startup, but I'll tell you something that I think is a fact. You will make less money doing a startup. You will run a smaller team doing a startup. You will have less impact doing a startup. Everything you do will matter less if you do a startup, and you'll work way more hours doing a startup. It frickin' sucks.
Thanks for keeping it real.
And if you still want to do it, you should 100% do a startup. Because the only reason to do a startup is because you want to. That's it. There's no other reason. It is worse in every other dimension. It will hurt every other aspect of your life. But if you want it, it's the most fun you'll ever have. And that I think is undeniably true. And that's what I think YC taught me.
That's a great lesson. Pablo and I feel the same way. So you got through Y Combinator. You have this founding team that you went through these trials and tribulations with, how do you grow that? How do you find the best people? What is the importance of having good people on your team? And not only technical people, but people that you trust, that will take a project and fully own it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting question, Chris. I think when people talk about the co-founder relationship, that relationship is unlike any other you'll have in your life. It's so intertwined into every aspect of your life that it's hard to differentiate between them and your partner, because you spend almost as many, you probably spend more hours with your co-founder than you do with your partner, just by the nature of the workload that a startup demands. You're talking about them with like very intimate thoughts, because like your futures are effectively interconnected in every way. And then at some point you're like, we're gonna hire someone. And that's hard, because how do you bring someone else into that dynamic? It's like building a throuple. It's really hard, right? Especially if you haven't practiced anything like that. So that's probably the first time when you recognize how important relationships are and how you have to manage them. And you're gonna convince someone who probably has really good opportunities to give up and throw away their opportunities to come and join your shitty company, right? And I think that's the framing Aaron and I had when we started hiring, which is people are gonna throw away amazing opportunities to join their shitty company. And maybe it won't be shitty a couple years from now, but right now it's definitely shitty. And it is for a while, I think, until it's definitely not shitty, but I don't think you can tell until you're way past the point of recognizing that. Someone's gotta take the same bet that you did. And attracting that kind of person requires a lot of things, but I think the number one thing it requires is trust. And they have, and not you on them, I mean, it requires that as well, but them on you. They have to genuinely believe that you are going to give them whatever opportunity that they were perhaps seeking and unable to get anywhere else. Our first few hires were mostly very senior engineers. Our first hire turned down OpenAI to come join us. Our second hire is an MIT PhD, 20 years in the industry. Our third hire is someone that makes YouTube videos about technical content on YouTube and gets like 500K plus views on his content, and also an extremely good Rust developer. And so on and so on. And the bar that we have set is everyone on the team must be amazing. And we basically give everyone the worst deal they will ever get in their life. Like we don't give you a good offer. We give you an offer that's like 120K, which is not good. If once you're past the senior level engineer, these engineers are easily making $500,000. You can go look on like Levels or any like comp website on engineering.com. And what we say is, I remember Airbnb founders used to do this. They're like, "Is this your last 6 months on the earth? Would you come work at Airbnb?" And most people would say no. And they hired people that said yes. Which is really, really hard to find. But they did that. And that's kind of what we do, which is we find people that could do anything else in the world. In fact, part of our interview pipeline is we help them get their dream job as an offer. And then we say, here's your dream job that you want. You want to work at OpenAI? We'll help you. You want to work at Anthropic? We'll help you. We'll help you land those offers, and then we'll say, okay, you have that offer, that's amazing, by all regards. And no sane human should turn that down. And you have our offer, which is not amazing. And our company, which is not amazing. But if you want to come join and make it amazing, then we'd love to have you. And we just make it, let them choose.
Are you still pre-revenue?
We make some money now.
Okay. From the last pivot to now, how long was that building cycle? So I guess until you had your first revenue.
Our current product is probably very different than most people's first product. Our current product is a programming language, and there's just not. I think everyone's been on a roller coaster. You know when you see those signs, you must be this tall to ride? I think in startups, there's a sign that says you must be this tall to sell. And what that means is certain products you can sell very early. You can sell them without anything. Certain products you need to build a little bit to go sell. Certain products you need to build a lot. I think sadly we fall into the last category because a developer is so finicky about what they were willing to buy and use. And a programming language is just not something a developer has a very high tolerance for. It has to work perfectly. Small things like syntax highlighting, when like the code gets rendered perfectly, You think, yeah, of course, it works everywhere. You're right, because that's because every other language you use has been around for 20 plus years. That's why it works. Someone wrote that code. We have to do that for our language. So it took us almost like, I remember we had almost no users. Oh, we had like less than 10 users for like the first 9 months of our product. Now we have hundreds every week. We have hundreds of companies deployed in production. But it took us, I don't remember the month. It took us a while before we really started making money of any kind.
And this is a real life example, going back to what Pablo mentioned earlier at the beginning of the day. The Mr. Beast example, right? In his YouTuber subscriber account, he started the first 4 years, he didn't get over 1,000 subscribers, and then all of a sudden it started compounding. I think by the following third year, he had over 12 million. So it's probably a blessing that you fall into that last category because you have a technical moat.
Yeah, I mean,
Technical moat.
it's probably pretty hard for anyone to copy us, including giant companies like Amazon, Google, OpenAI. I'm not worried about them copying us. It's very hard to build what we're doing. But I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. You can build a technical moat and build a bad business. So that's always, I think, something to be aware of. But we had conviction from the very beginning, at least of some kind, that there's something in this space that we're going after, and the world might need a new programming language. So we were willing to like churn through those like first year or so without any real customers, and just a few people along the way. And we always saw signs of like fate. Like we saw customers that move on to us, and not very many, but a few of them, they'd be like, wow, this is amazing. I just deleted 90% of my code, thank God. We'd see signs like that, they'd be like, oh, my system got better and more accurate. But it wasn't frequent. It was like once every few months, which hurt. And like we were always wondering, like, should we just change our idea? Should we pivot? But there was something about it from a technical standpoint that seemed worth it. And I think this alludes back to me and Aaron's like background. We weren't out of college building this company. We were both like pretty senior level engineers. We had to run slightly larger teams. So we viewed it differently than I think a lot of people do. We were looking at it from like, what is code that like a staff level engineer or a senior staff engineer would look at and go, dang, that's pretty. Because I think pretty code matters. And that was really the insight. But we could have easily just quit like a couple months before we started getting any users. And we're still not there yet. We still have a long way to go. But the way I put it is, we're not dying anymore, we're just not winning. And we have to find that inflection point and find like the ultimate win point.
I wanted to conclude with one last question, just sharing some advice for everybody in the room today. I mean, you went internship, and then you started working, and then you got into entrepreneurship. For somebody graduating today, I mean, many people graduated in May, a few people graduated in May, and then they have a little bit more time before they graduate. You kind of have a pulse on the market, especially in the developer world. Is there any advice you can give to a graduate leaving and entering the workforce on maybe a specific company they might want to join, or how to go about doing that, or just advice in general?
Yeah, I think do things you love. So if you do things you love, you'll just do better. You'll perform better. You'll like doing it more. And I know I said I work a lot now. I work like 100, 120 hours a week in the seat. Yeah, but I also worked a lot when I was at Microsoft and at Google. I worked a lot at DHI because I was always on teams that I really, really liked, and I optimized for that. If you're looking for a job right now, I'd say find a manager you really like, not a company you like, because that matters more in success. And then also, just like decide what you want to do, and if you want to go do a startup, start. There's no better time than today. I mean, there's like qualifications, like if you need a visa or if you need some other things to account for, like don't screw yourself, like account for everything. If you need money in the bank, like don't go start. To go to a company, but like don't make yourself miserable working a job you kind of think you have to do it. If you're going to go to work, just go to a company. Because the company you're built when you're like right out of college is very different than when you're built 10 years later. I can never build Snapchat. I can't even think of that idea because I'm not on these apps. I'm not talking to people. I'm not talking to students. And there's tons of companies that are very, very successful that can only be built in certain phases of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Go get some work experience. I mean, especially if you have that visa block there, go get some work experience. Go learn. You know, a lot of students, when they're going through university, and, you know, maybe saw some of this in the pitches earlier for your problem, is you see the world in a narrow view. You don't necessarily see a problem that everybody has in the world. You see it from a student's point of view. So I would say, if you're not absolutely certain about starting something, you don't really know what a problem in your life may be, go work at a big enterprise. So you may see more problems in the world after doing so.
If you're not excited about being miserable, go get a job.
That too.
That's the best way I think I'd put it. But if you're gonna go apply for a job somewhere else and you wanna get a job, especially in today's environment, you gotta stick out. If you wanna stick out, what I would do is I'd write an email to the CEO explaining to them really briefly why you're amazing and why they should hire you. I don't mean like a 200, like 500 word essay. I mean, like maybe like 50 words that succinctly describe why you're amazing. And I don't also mean things like, I'm a fast learner. Everyone's gonna write that email. Write words in those 50 words or 150 words that literally no one else is going to be able to write. Right? So like, for example, there's this one kid who applied to us for an internship, and he got to like state level tennis in collegiate, and almost got to collegiate level tennis in 2 years of never having played tennis. There's this other kid that emailed me. I was like, I run a 5:30 mile, and that doesn't sound relevant, but someone that runs a 5:30 mile and can compete in triathlons like competitively, you know what I know they have? They have grit. I know they'll grind through. And add on to that, they also code for some of their GitHub. It just gives me a signal. It's like, okay, they're definitely better than a lot of other people, at least at sitting down and doing the work. Do they have the knowledge? I can find out on a quick call. But, and if you've done anything that you think is remarkable or just like different than all your peers, that should be in the 150 words. If 10 of your friends could write the same thing in an email, remove all those words. It's better to have one thing that's remarkable rather than like 15 things that aren't.
How much money have you raised? Just curious. Just general ballpark.
YC gives you like 500K, and we raised a little bit more than that. But we don't really spend money. I remember the first year in life, I gave myself a $0 salary for quite a few years. My first year after raising funding, I paid myself 70K. I think I finally paid myself 120K. And all this is like, I remember when I got my job, I was making more than 7x that in a year, 7 or 8x that in a year easy. So if you just like take an L, you just agree that you're not gonna make money, but do stuff.
I wanted to bring that up as pre-context to our next session, so fundraising class. But the point I wanted to make there was, and I kind of knew the answer, which is part of the reason I asked, you don't have to raise money to go build a company. You can bootstrap it. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you not to raise money unless you reach an inflection point where you have this product market fit, as we talked about, and you're ready to scale it up very rapidly. That's like the fuel to the fire, right? So I just wanted to bring that up as a little bit of a pre-context. You have a hard stop. I don't want to keep you over. I wanted to give the option for questions if anybody had any. By the way, one of the smartest developers I know personally in Seattle. No, please.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You can go first.
Didn't hear clearly what did you actually do?
Oh.
What's the product?
Yeah, I didn't talk about it too much. Our product is called BAML. It's on GitHub. If you search BAML on Google, rank 1 will be Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Will be rank 2. So you should see a DML. For the developers out there, you've probably heard of LangChain, CrewAI, a lot of these other systems that build AI pipelines. We do that, but in a way that's very different. So if you've ever in web developer code, you use React, which is a programming language designed to help make front-end code way more accurate and sustainable and maintainable. We do that for building agent